Okay. So you will put these by the fan with your initials on them, and then you will throw for half of the block, just like you did last time. And then after the halfway bell rings, when you finish that pot, you will clean up like you're leaving for the day, and then you will spend the second half trimming. Okay? So it's going to look a little bit different. If you did not get any pots last week off the wheel, you will just throw the whole time. And then the next time you throw, you will trim whatever you got. Make sense? Yes? Okay. Go ahead and pass that around. Just touch that real quick and pass it. I will walk around and I will be flipping those and moving those pots. So it is important that you put your initials on it because they will all look the same. Okay, put your initials on them, put it by the fan. I will move them, I will flip them over. When they're ready to be trimmed, I will let you know. They should feel like that, okay? When you touch it, you should not see any fingerprints. So it needs to be dry enough where you don't see fingerprints, but it can't be too dry because you're still working with it, okay? So just feel that. Pass it around. When you're trimming, you will need a trimming tool. I don't know which direction. There we go. Trimming tool that looks like this. Okay, it's like a triangle with a big handle. There are some smaller ones. All the trimming tools are in that drawer. Everybody look where I'm pointing. That drawer that says trimming tools. Okay, so it's not with the other tools. They are separate. You will need a trimming tool. You will also need clay that is not too soft. So you will not use the pugged clay. Okay, when you throw, you use the pug clay. You will use the hand building clay for this because this is what's keeping the pot on the wheel. So if it's too soft, then the pot will move. We don't want that. Okay, all right. Ready? Okay. The first thing you're gonna do is look at your pot and see how thick it is because you need to trim it so that the walls and the bottom are about the same thickness. Okay, so right now I have pretty thin walls. I want the bottom to be thin as well. When you pick your pot up, you're going to notice it feels really heavy on the bottom. We don't want that to happen at the end. We want it to be really thin. Okay, so feel how much you have to trim off. Some of you might not have a lot, so you need to be aware of that because if you think you have a lot and you go right through the bottom, then you can't keep the pot. All right, so make sure you know how much you have. Also keep in mind that the top of your pot is probably centered differently than the bottom of your pot. You guys are brand new throwers, so you probably didn't have it centered all the way through. Okay, so when we center this to trim it, we're actually just going to center the bottom. All right, so I'm going to start by putting this in the middle based on the bat, but because this is probably a different centered than this, it might not be perfect. So we have to test it and make sure that the bottom is centered as well. All right, which is the hardest part about trimming, just like throwing. Okay, centering is the hardest part about throwing. You will trim everything on low. Okay, you're going to use your finger as a guide, and you're going to keep your hand on this basin, and you're going to point under this icky stuff. All this stuff is going to get trimmed away. So we don't need to trim. We don't need to center that because if you center it, you're going to trim it away, so it doesn't matter. You need to center it under all this extra stuff. You do not want to center it down here because, like I said, this is going to be different than up here. We're centering it right here. So I'm going to take my finger and I'm going to point at it. And if you look on the screen, you can see that my finger is moving, and then it doesn't anymore. Okay, so that means the pot's hitting my finger, and then it's not. Okay, it's not centered. If it's centered, then it's going to hit my finger all the way around. All right, now, if you do this, it hits your finger all the way around, but you're not centering it. Okay, so don't say, Miss Danner, my finger's hitting the pot all the way around. I'm going to tell you no. You have to poke it, like in real life, not on Facebook. Okay, like you're going to poke somebody. You have to poke it. So you're just going to slowly move your finger until it hits just a little. Okay, and then you're going to leave your finger there. All right, so you're going to sort of watch this and get a pattern, and then with your other hand you have to turn the wheel off, and you have to remember where it hit your finger. Okay, it hit over here, so you're going to move it the opposite direction with two hands just a little bit. So I'm just going to move it a little bit. Now I heard somebody say, oh geez, that's right, it's a little bit difficult. Okay, it takes practice just like anything else. All right, it will take some time, but you'll get used to it. I'm going to move this a little bit because I want you to see. If I have my finger here, okay, if you look at my hand or you look at the screen, you can tell this is not centered, yeah? Okay, because it's hitting my finger and then it's going away. So I want you to watch the pot. I'm going to stop the wheel and I want you to tell me where it's hitting my finger, okay? So I'm here. Okay, so I'm going to point to a spot, and when I hit the spot where it hit my finger, I want you to scream. Ready? Here, here. There you go, there you go. So I'm going to move it the opposite way, just a little bit. So let's try that again. Okay, here. Right here. Okay, so you gotta sort of watch it, and like I said, it takes a lot of practice. This is actually easier to do on the kick wheel. Does anybody know why? Any ideas? You can stop the wheel. You can stop the wheel. You can find where it hit your finger, and then you can just stop the wheel, and you can just slowly move the wheel until it hits your finger again, and then you know exactly where it hits. Okay, so you could throw for half of the block on these wheels, and then if there's a kick wheel open, go trim over there. Okay, it's a lot easier on the kick wheel. So I'm here, I'm hitting about here, and you will kind of get the hang of it because you'll know how long it takes for the wheel to stop. Okay, I'm showing you how to trim on this one because it is a little bit more difficult, but you guys have a big class, so you will probably have to trim on these wheels. Okay, it hit about right here, so I'm going to move it the opposite direction just a little bit. You want to make sure you use 2 hands. If you use one, you'll probably push it and it'll get stuck, and then you'll just push it a lot, and then you'll have to start all over again. Okay, so you'll push with 2 hands. The longer it hits your finger, the closer you are to being centered, and the less you have to move it. I'm sort of hitting in 2 spots right now, which tells me that I probably have a bump in my pot. I wonder if I could do this blindfolded. One day I'm going to try to throw blindfolded. This is hitting in a couple different spots. So I'm going to go ahead and stop it and put my stoppers on. You guys will be able to tell when you start to trim if it's not centered, and you can always stop and readjust it. Before I start trimming, I want to make sure this thing sticks because I just took all this time centering it, right? So I don't want it to move. You're going to put a hand on top, you're going to take a little piece of clay, and you're going to push it against the back and then out wide. You don't want to push too hard against your pot because you don't want to break it. All right, you will need these, I call these stoppers. You will need these all the way around your pot, so 5 or 6 stoppers all the way around your pot. And always hold it on the top, because if you don't hold it down up here, then you might push it, okay? And you really don't want to move it after you get it centered. Your stoppers should be low and wide, okay? You don't want stoppers all the way, I mean, this is a pretty large pot, but you guys, your pots will be smaller, so you don't want them all the way up here because you're going to trim this. So if you hit a stopper, you can't trim it. So you want to keep them pretty low and wide because that's going to help hold it steady. So now I have these stoppers all the way around, and I'm ready to trim. Okay, trimming is a lot like throwing. Your hands are going to work together, your elbows are going to stay down. You're always on low when you're trimming. First thing you're going to do, and you guys probably noticed when you pulled the wire under your pot when you were taking off the wheel, you did that 3 times. Maybe it felt like there were different spots each time you pulled it. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is kind of trim or flatten out this bottom, because you can see I have some kind of gross stuff there. Everything you do is going to be at the 3 o'clock. So if this is the clock, that's my 12. I'm going to trim right here. I'm just going to hold this flat and get any extra clay off that I don't want. Okay, you want to flatten this out, but it's probably already flat because you ran the wire tool under it. Okay, so it's probably pretty good already. Okay, now I'm right here. Notice my fingers here are holding the pot down, so they're not pressing really hard, but they're just here because if this pot flies off, I want to be able to catch it before it hits somebody in the face, okay, because it will do that. So I have my hand here, and if it starts to get loose, I can grab it. So I don't want to be like over here, la 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 la, and then whoosh, okay, because your pot will get ruined. So I'm here, okay, after I clean the top up, I'm going to just tilt it, and see my fingers are still in the middle of the pot, just in case. My hands are still working together, my thumb's touching my hand, both of my pointer fingers are on the tool, and I'm just going to start taking this off. Sorry, I've got some more. Okay, kind of reminds me of chocolate shavings, like on a pie, you know? They don't taste that good though, so don't eat them. And I know when I throw pots, I really have thick pots right here, so I know I'm going to have to cut away quite a bit. So I'm taking a lot off, but you'll need to look at your pot and see where you need to trim it. You'll also notice there's a line here. We want to get rid of that line, so you'll want to trim down to the line. You don't want to trim all the way down though, because if I hit the stoppers, you're gonna have this weird line where the stoppers are. I also know that my bottom's a little bit thick, so I am gonna carve a little bit of this off. And you can pick your shape, so you can start trimming. If you want to hold it straight up and down, then you'll have kind of a square bottom, or you can move your tool and you can make it round. Do all sorts of things. So whatever you want to do, you just got to make sure you're not going to trim all the way through it. Okay, so I have my extra stuff cleaned off, and this is kind of how I want it, so I'm going to go ahead and continue on here. Although I can tell I'm a little off center. You'll be able to tell in just a minute. My last step is to put a foot on. Okay, a foot is just a ring around the outside of your pot. If you look at any of your dishes at home, you're gonna see a ring around the outside. That's the foot. What the foot does, it makes it look nice on the bottom, okay, and it also keeps it stable. So if you cut the middle out and you have a nice foot on the bottom, it's gonna lay flat, okay, whereas if you didn't have anything, it would probably be wobbly. So I'm gonna take this tool, and this is where you might want a smaller tool, so we have some smaller tools if you have a small base. I'm gonna pinch this with my left hand, and I'm just gonna carve a line towards the outside of my pot. Now, if you look on the screen, or if you can see this here, okay, I'm gonna stop this. If my foot is centered, then this will be the same thickness all the way around. Is my foot centered? No, it's a little bit thick in one spot. Okay, so at this point, I might take this off and recenter it. I might just move it a little bit, see if that helps. You will be graded on if your foot's center or not. So if it's really off, you'll probably want to re-center it. Okay. If it's close, you might keep it. It's up to you. But keep in mind that is part of your grade. Let me see where I'm at here. I'm going to trim this, flatten this off again. Try a new one and see if I'm closer. I think I'm worse. Yeah, all right. Okay. So I'm still off center, but I'm going to go ahead and finish this so I can show it to you. But I will probably go back later and fix that. Okay. Once you have that foot carved out, this middle part needs to be flat. So I'm just going to hold this flat again like I did at the beginning. And trim out the middle. Okay, the depth of this doesn't really matter as long as you can see the foot around the outside. Man, that's not centered. Don't do this. Okay. All right, once I think I'm done, I'm going to stop the wheel. I'm going to take it off. Okay, and I want you just to feel it. Feel if it's heavy on the bottom. You guys can pass this around. Feel if it's heavy on the bottom. It's a little bit heavy. I'll probably trim some more off. Okay. You will most likely have to center it, trim it, take it off, center it, trim it, take it off a couple times because you need it to be thin on the bottom. Okay. So you might have to trim a couple times, and that's okay. All right. When you're done trimming, you will grab your stoppers. If they're still good, put those back in the bag. All of these scraps you can wipe into the bowl. Okay. And you will put those in the slip bucket downstairs. All right, so it's a pretty easy cleanup when you're trimming. You don't need a lot of time to clean up. You just wipe them in. And I would dump this downstairs, okay? Now, if you haven't been listening, here's the time to listen. Before you put your pot downstairs, you have to put your initials on the bottom. Okay, I'm gonna say that again. Before you put your pot downstairs, you have to put your initials on the bottom. If there are no initials on it and it is downstairs on a shelf, I will recycle it, okay? So I told you you had to have 4 pots because I want 2 of them to make it through the kiln. If you don't put your initials on it, and you think you have 4 pots down there, you only have 3, okay, because I recycled it. I'm not going to grade something that I don't know for sure that you did, all right? So you have to have your initials. I have 2 pottery classes, which means if I were you, I would use all 3 initials if you have 3 initials, or make some sort of symbol or something so you know that it's yours. You might have the same initials as somebody else in that class. Okay, so make sure you're writing something on there that's relevant to you, okay? You will write your initials with the needle tool right down here, and then you will put it downstairs. You will keep track of your own pots. So once you put it downstairs, then you have 1, okay? Once you have 4 down there, that's when you can throw with more clay or you can kind of throw for fun, all right? But I don't know how many you have down there, okay? So you have to keep track of that, all right? What do you do after you are finished trimming a pot?
Put your initials on it.
Your initials on it
And put
it downstairs.